Yeah, I'm going to give you a little bit of background tonight on how this snowball that became the Parents with Questions movement and some of the sort of interesting things that happened behind the scenes, and talk a little also about the forward-facing plans and where we go next, and hopefully provide some insights. The story began about September in 21, and I kept getting letters from Justine Elliott, our federal MP at the time, saying, you know, if you've got any concerns or any information you want, please contact us. And I had concerns. I said, yeah, I want to know what's going on with this vaccine. And I looked up I don't normally do a lot of research, but this time I thought I might research this properly. And I went to the Therapeutic Goods Administration website, the TGA, which is the official site reporting injuries and so on, and saw at that point there was 447 deaths reported from the rollout, and the wording on it was they'd been reviewed and deemed not related, something along those lines. It was one line on their official website for 447 deaths, and there was 7 had officially died from the vaccination at that point. This is the adult rollout. And I'm like, well, how the hell is that not in the mainstream media? How is that not up there with every other statistic? Because at that point, if you'll remember, that was when we all had COVID statistics were the only thing on the news, how many people had infections and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, that's fine, but let's have that statistic next to it. So I just wrote to Justine Elliott and said, can I have an answer to this? Why? These are my questions up here. And it was very polite. I wasn't being a kooky conspiracist or anything. I just said, look, can you just explain? I'm a parent and I want to know before I do this to my kids because the rollout's coming for the kids. And didn't get an answer. I rang up and said, can I have an answer to my email? Oh, no, don't know what that's about. You'll have to ring back. On the third phone call, I genuinely, by her staff in her office, I asked about this. I got told the TGA was some conspiracy site and go and F off and get effing vaccinated by her office. So at that point, I got my back up. All right, that really pissed me off. So I got a bunch of people together and we had a meeting on a Zoom. And I got a good network and I got some skills in fundraising and sort of getting things started. I've been a lifelong entrepreneur. But I was nervous about it. I stepped outside my comfort zone. I thought, what can we do here? And we pulled a bunch of people together and said, look, let's just chuck $5,000 each in the pot and let's mount a campaign, because we've got this kids campaign was looming. And as a parent, I've got 3 little kids, 3 little girls. And I'm like, it's killed 500 people already, and now we're going to give it to our kids. That has got to stop. That is not okay. And basically the strategy was, let's just sue some MPs for not telling the truth. Not because we want to put them in jail necessarily, but let's hold them to account so they'll speak up. And because what I recognised was that they weren't speaking up and they were allowing the narrative to continue without any question. And this was very early on in the piece. So I was very conscious that they're not all bastards, they're not all bad. Some of them must have a conscience, let them speak up. That would put a wobble in the narrative and have everyday people like us go, okay, well, there's 2 sides of the story. That's all I was after. And then we can all make a fully informed decision. You know, we're supposed to have informed choice. We need all the information. The horrible result of that was this kind of action. This was the outcome, is we couldn't actually get legal representation. No one would take our money. We raised about $200,000 in the first week. And we said, let's go spend this and get a hotshot lawyer out of Sydney. And we interviewed about 15 lawyers and no one would even go touch it. All right? And I thought, something's really weird here. And this is, you know, what happened. This is the narrative that played out as a result of not getting that, I guess, across the line. But again, as a dad, what I recognised was this. Because I grew up, like a lot of blokes my age, with this kind of archetype to live into. And I wanted to go hit someone. You know, like I just was like, show me who to fight and I'll go fight them because I'll fight for my kids. And of course that doesn't work. And it really wasn't working at all, particularly when it came to, I mean, my kids were going to be okay, but I could see a lot of other kids who weren't. And I thought, well, just throwing information at people didn't work after all. Everyone had that experience where you thought, you want to wake people up and they just didn't want to hear it. So I thought, well, we can't keep doing that, it doesn't work, so let's stop doing it. And the legal stuff didn't work because no one would take our money. Well, we can do something, and that is think differently. And we basically started our own marketing campaign. And we had a group of really smart marketers who were kind of mentors of mine that I dragged into this group as donors, and we had all this great advice. So we had some of the best marketing brains in the country behind the scenes of PWQ. So it became this mission just to protect our kids and also just recognising the bigger vision was about elevating the consciousness of the next generation. You know, we've been handing them a pretty crappy end of the stick here with this. If you think about, you know, our lifestyle, our complacency, whatever you want to call it, has led to COVID, the whole shutdowns and everything that's gone on. And I thought, well, being responsible for that, let's make sure our kids are better than us. Let's make that sort of the bigger vision. So I turned into this, and you can flick through a few of these quickly. This is Parents' Questions, and we got all these celebrities, Trevor Hendy and John Farris and all these big-name celebrities. Enough of them came out and stood with everyday mums and dads and just said, you know what? Not no, but the message was, until I know for sure, I'm going to say no. And when I have all the information, then I'll make a decision. Which seems pretty reasonable, right? It's down the middle of the line. And that, as every parent, I think, you know, that's kind of our duty, is to say, well, unless I know everything I need to know about this thing, I'm not going to do it. And then we had this conversation starters, because what a lot of people were struggling with who were concerned about it was, you can go and talk to your sister or your brother-in-law or whoever and other parents, and we just couldn't get through to them because we're trying to scare the crap out of them. But they're already scared. That's why they're already rushing towards, you know, this supposed safe and effective vaccine, and just trying to scare them more just had them close up more. So to disrupt that orthodoxy, to get them thinking differently, we needed a different approach. So we engaged a very good psychologist called Lindsay Matthews, and he put some training up on how to have a loving, respectful, balanced conversation that opens people up. And we engaged thousands of people around the country, tens of thousands in fact, to actually go and have those conversations with their loved ones, just to make sure everyone at least had all the information before they went ahead and did something that wasn't reversible. So it was quite, in my view, I was most proud of this part of it because it gave everyday people the power to do something positive, and it was an act of love. They could go out and do something loving and get past their own ego and their own fear and their own judgment and just go and have a beautiful conversation, a challenging conversation with people they care about, and potentially change a life because of it. So it was quite, this is something I thought, that was a challenging thing for nearly everyone who did it, but a beautiful thing to do for everyone. It was an act of love for every child they stood up for. And this is some of the results we had. So we also launched a massive marketing campaign. The social media went wild. We got a top Sydney agency on board, and we spent $30,000 or more with them, doing all these high quality ads and tried to put them on billboards all over the country. By that point, we've raised $500,000 and more every week was coming in. And we said, well, let's go and spend all of it on advertising on the billboards. And they wouldn't take our money. No one would take our money for advertising. So it just became the media blackout, the censorship, the media blackout, the shadow banning, all that stuff is 100% real. We experienced all of it. All right. So, and again, it wasn't. We weren't making outrageous claims or scaring people. We were just trying to be upfront and saying, "Hey, have you thought about this?" This is just some of the social media again. In short, this hit 23.9 million people in its peak. So it obviously went overseas as well, but we just couldn't believe the size of it. And it was mainly organic. And then we got shut down off Facebook. We got banned on all the main social media, so we're back on Telegram now. So again, you know, this is just some of the craziness we lived through. It was for me personally, and I should say there's a big team of people around. Charlene, who's here, was a big contributor in terms of time and energy and money also. There's so many people put so much towards this, and it gained a momentum that was hard to even comprehend at the time. And it just showed me that the narrative wasn't being swallowed by everybody. This is some of the activators. So the real heroes of the movement were those who are out in the community having conversations with people and just wobbling the narrative, as we say it, in a respectful, gentle way without trying to scare the crap out of people. You know, we had celebrities, as I said, we had people doing flyers, people marching in rallies and just doing local events. And I'm saying tens of thousands all over the country. It was remarkable how many people jumped on board with it because all we're doing was giving them something tangible they could do, which I think was the key thing. Prior to that, it was like, well, what the hell can I do? There's this sense of helplessness against it. Yeah, and like I said, anyone who's looked at these people and said, you know, you're all crazy, what are you doing this for? It's like, well, what do you think they're doing it for? They've got everything to lose in terms of family and the community and their respect. You know, like there's so much they put at stake by speaking up. There's nothing to gain in it. There's no benefit. And it was purely because they felt it was the right thing to do. And there's an analogy I'm going to keep using from now on is when a few years ago, some worker in a strawberry place in a factory put needles in strawberries. Do you remember that? And there's maybe 5 needles in strawberries went out across millions and millions of strawberries. Who ate strawberries that week? No one. Everyone stopped, right? And just because you didn't want to eat strawberries when you knew there might be a needle in it, didn't make you anti-strawberry. All right? It didn't. But it did make you question. And that's all I am, and that's what most of us, I think, who are in this movement are, is just people who've questioned it. We're not anti-anything. And we got labelled as anti-this and anti-that. So, no, we just don't want to eat needles in strawberries or even take that risk. And if there is a risk there's a needle in them, I'll tell you and you and you and everyone I know not to eat them until we know for sure they're okay. Pretty straightforward, right? And it culminated in this. This is Canberra. Is anyone else in Canberra for the big rally? Steve? This was a remarkable time because so many of us had felt so alone. And we realised that, you know, at least 10% of the country seemed to turn up at this thing. And for everyone was there, I think there was probably 10 that wished they could have been. And yeah, I felt that was a really a big turning point. And we got, you know, irradiated with these long-range audio devices, and you know, there was some horrible stuff going on. But long story short, it sort of hit this point where, okay, the country is at least coalesced into there's camps. I don't know. There's something in it. I got to speak on stage at this thing. It was absolutely, you know, like it was a rock star moment for me, and it was very intoxicating. But I was there with the most beautiful souls, and in front of, you know, everyone, every single person in that. There was so much love in that group of people, you know, of, you know, 1.5 million, whatever there was. The place was just glued with love. The vibe was incredible. It was beautiful. So to some extent, I guess we had some success insofar as the rollout for the age group that we were concerned about, this 5 to 11-year-old age group, who, for the record, have got so close to zero a chance of dying from COVID that it was like, how could we possibly take the risk, just to put that in. The rollout was not as successful as I'd hoped. So we felt, well, we knew for sure that we'd had some successes, because we always said early on, people would say to me, well, you know, what's success look like? These are people who are putting big money, you know, putting a lot of money in. The minimum donation was $5,000, by the way. So it wasn't like put your $10 in from your pension or anything. It was like, no, if you can't afford it, you don't put it in. If you can afford it, donate generously. It was that kind of approach. But people would say to me every week, you know, how do you know this will be successful? How do you define the success of it? I said, one kid. One kid. That's all it takes. Then the floods came, and we all been through this, I know. We saw this happen. 2 things happened that I saw. One is we ran out of food really quick. Anyone else see that? Where suddenly there's no supermarket at all, or if it was there, it was empty. And the second was really surprising. People who'd been locking each other out of venues a week previous for not having a green tick suddenly went out and started helping each other, looking after each other. I was in a really dark place at this point because I was just so flattened by the effort of everything. My whole life had been on adrenaline for, about 5 months at that point, and I felt it's kind of PTSD or something, and I was drained and shocked and didn't know what to do. I was in a bit of a mess. And seeing this gave me a lot of hope back. People can actually look after each other, and that's their true nature. So, and I thought that's the essence of what we've got to keep hold of that, and not let them take it away from us. Never forget it again. So they can't kill that off. They lost out on the floods. Whatever was going on there, this spirit survived, and I think that's the thing that I took from it. Anyone know this piece of work by David Hawkins? It's called The Map of Consciousness, The Scale of Consciousness. It's basically, it's something, I'm not going to try and explain it in depth because it's way beyond me and it's fairly, obviously it's complex, but the simplicity of it, if there is any, is in it's a calibration scale, a vibration of things or people, emotions, movement. You can calibrate anything and see the vibration of it and actually measure it using kinesiology and muscle testing and get this exponential scale from 0 to 1,000 and sort of plot everything on that scale. Now, why it's important to me anyway was the whole government crackdown on everything that went on was all about fear and making people withdraw and be anxious and, shame on you if you don't wear your mask and guilt because, you do it, you've got to take your shot for everyone else's sake. We're going to frighten the crap out of you. It's hopeless unless you do it. There's all this negativity, and then anger was a step above that. If you look at the scale, it calibrates above grief and apathy and fear, but it's still anger. It's not life affirming. It's only when you get above this level of 200 that our actions become life affirming. So I saw a lot of what was going on in the freedom movement, matching the energy of the government's sort of crackdown and the media narrative with matching fear with fear and anger with anger and so on. And, try to shame people into doing things. That didn't work for me. And by looking at this and really having to dig deep and doing a lot of spiritual sort of soul searching for myself, realised that the only way out of this quagmire was to transcend it and to get above it. And moving into the stage of, courage was something I think all those activators and all the people that stood up, I showed you there before, showed. Getting to the point of willingness and acceptance of the thing actually gave us a place to act from, a place to be creative from. So seeing the harmony in it and accepting the situation and the process up here is transcendence. So I realised that unless we were going to transcend some of these problems that were being presented to us on a regular basis, ongoing basis, it's just going to be a fight and another fight and another fight and another fight, and it literally would have killed me. I ended up in Byron Hospital, thought I was having a heart attack. So I was like, this is like tap on the shoulder. I got to figure this one out. This is a quote I read recently, and the opposite of war isn't peace, it's creativity. Which I love, because as an entrepreneur, creativity is kind of natural for me, and I think that's part of that spirit they can't control in all of us. So just, again, as a dad, and just seeing that big vision for our children, I just kept thinking, well, what sort of world are our kids living into here? Is it going to be one more round of endless shots that the government says you have to take no matter what? Is it going to be digital IDs? Is it going to be this level of hyper control? I don't want that for my kids. I want them to be free as I've been. And I recognise also that a lot of people, myself I guess included at different times, we tended, I think the paradigm we've been living in is to externalise things. You know, mummy and daddy, government's going to sort it, or the dole office, or, you know, the salary, the banker I work for, whoever. There's always this level of someone else to do it for us. And we've all been guilty of it to a point, I believe. It's just the paradigm we've been growing up in. It's been easy to do that. And we've been able to, until now, to trust it to a point. Having those things cut off, like for me, to not trust my government anymore was actually really traumatic for me. I'm a pretty mainstream kind of guy, and I was like, man, I can't trust going to a hospital. I can't trust this government I'm paying tax to. I can't trust the MP to remotely tell the truth. You know, well, I'm going to internalise my own power, and I'm not going to let that take anything away. So from a point of view of empowerment, again, this is my mental and emotional process I was going through more so than the movement, but this is what we created. So if we move on, is we thought, well, let's start owning our food system. We saw in the floods that can be taken away from us. Let's create our baseline physiological needs and then stack the other needs on top of that. Because the majority of us are in the position where, you know, if your supermarket runs out of food, you're buggered. You know, within a week you're really hungry and you're stuck and you'll do anything for food. And that sounds extreme in Australia to say that, but we did live through it, the flood. And historically, I look at other times when, you know, government overreach / totalitarian regimes have taken over. Food is a weapon, weaponisation of taking away food. So hopefully I'm completely off the mark about that and it will never happen, but it actually gives us something very fulfilling anyway to be able to feed ourselves and provide for ourselves. And my kids are in a Steiner, well, we're in a Steiner school now, in a Steiner education. That's one of the things they imbue in the kids, is that sense of you can look after yourself on some fundamental levels, because it gives them a strong sense of place in the world. So even if it's just energetic, it's still worth being able to feed ourselves. And look, this is, you guys, I'm sure we've seen in the last 6 months the price rises of food. Everything's getting more expensive. It just seems to be going up, and every week it goes up again. Price of lettuce, $8 a lettuce. I mean, these things used to be given away. Again, these are mainstream things now, and it's all over the world. So again, this narrative is creeping across every news channel in every country. Now, I'm like, what's going on here that this happens everywhere at the same time, globally? It's crazy. This is happening. Farmers are being, in my mind, this is just a land grab. I don't know if anyone sees this, but this is happening in the Netherlands right now, where the government's putting farmers out on the basis of climate, and they're buying up places particularly close to, you know, these mega cities they're trying to build. So it's kind of obvious. But either way, you know, pushing farmers out of production makes you question what they're planning on doing to replace that production. Personally, I know what it's like to get locked out of the bank, Bunnings and restaurants and so on. I don't think it's a big leap to see that unless I've got my ID in place, they'll lock me out of Woolies or whatever as well. So personally, I think that's a reasonable sort of thing to be precautioning against. And, you know, whether you think of this guy, he has been buying up farmland in the US for the last 10 years or more. And he's trying to sell you fake meat and GMO crops and all these things that, you know, don't stack up when it comes to natural health. Who knows what he's up to? And I'm not going to I try to keep away from the deep conspiracy stuff, but, you know, you can put two and two together and say that's probably not the guy you want in charge of everything, given his track record so far. The fact is, I've been working in this space for the last 5 years. I took a big career sort of departure and decided I was going to go and do whatever I could to change the food system. I did that about 5, 6 years ago. I nearly went broke in the process while I figured out what that was going to look like. But here's the opportunity, because what I've been aware of for a long time is the food we've been feeding ourselves and our kids is unnutritious, it's full of chemicals, it's pretty rubbish. And the health, if you look at the next slide, these are some of the major diseases in the US of the last 30 years. Thyroid cancer and what have we got there? The red line's glyphosate usage, Roundup on our crops, so GMO crops, and they're all the major chronic diseases. All right, so again, you don't have to be a genius to find this stuff out. For my mind, the good news is we've got a solution to all that, which is regenerative farming, good farming, not necessarily the way we've been doing it to date, but regenerative farming and owning that food system has a multitude of solutions attached to it. And this is where the family farm has really come into its own. So this is the current project, but basically it's good for the planet. It sequesters carbon, it stops all the soil disappearing into the sky. It's working with nature. It actually grows soil, protects the soil. It's regenerative rather than extractive. So it's just back how our grandfathers and grandparents might have done it, and our great-grandparents might have done it. It's future-proofing. And if you're into the carbon and climate stuff, this is the quickest way. This is not my opinion. This is all the great climate scientists of the world, like, what's his name, Drawdown, what's that guy? Who? Paul Hawken. Collectively, if we change agriculture, we sequester enough carbon to stop global warming within, I think it's in 6 or 12 months. One of the great things about regenerative farming is it's producing nutrient-dense food. Good soil produces good food. So we overcome this health crisis to a large degree by actually feeding ourselves food that's going to work well for us. And it reduces food miles, it connects people back to a sense of community, a sense of self-worth, being able to do something useful. When it comes to kids, I think having kids connected to a farm, we call it a family farm because most of us remember as a kid, there we are, having a friend who had a farm, you could go and visit. And it felt good to just be, you go out and ride horses and motorbikes and get muddy and swim in the dam and all that sort of things. And I just don't see kids doing that these days. So I think the family farm is a great way for kids to connect with nature. The cost of food I thought was important to address too, and there's a solution for that in this. Because we can grow a lot of food on these farms that can feed a lot of people for a lot less than you can buy at the mainstream stores now. It's not saying the farmers aren't making the money. The $8 lettuce does not go to the farmer. Right? They're making the same money. So someone else in between is making all that coin. And really just having a peer group around that makes a difference to people. I think that's what most of us needed, or we having not had it during the lockdowns, this became the thing people are looking for. And so far on the farms that we have got, that's been the thing. They come along for the food, they kind of think, yeah, I don't secure my food supply. But the real reason people are there, I think, is they just want to be around like minds. They want to be part of something bigger than themselves and feel part of a village again, part of something important. For me personally, I want my kids to have, no practical things, not just iPads and so on. The idea of the farms too is, my grandiose vision for it is they become flagship sites for what's doable. So if we can do it, someone else can do it, and someone else can do it, and they can replicate it overseas, as you were saying earlier. So it's, we want to see this happen everywhere. We don't need to own it. We want to see it as something that's easily replicated. So this is the new mission. This is what we became about. Complete departure from where we started in a lot of ways, but it was really about next generation. So the way we do this is fractional farm ownership. So it's really syndicating buying a farm, effectively. We're buying big commercial farms that have a farmer on them. We hand select a farmer who's either like-minded, values aligned, and able to produce a lot of food. So people are buying a managed investment, effectively, but they can also go there and camp and buy their food. That sounds really simple. The complexity of it behind the back has been the last few months getting it figured out through all the regulations and the amount of hoops we've been jumping through. It's just been, I won't even describe it. But we've worked it out now and it's happening. So if we go again. The food hub is a good concept. And again, there's a lot of these out there. You can find these around this area now already. So please don't think this is not the only one that's available. And I encourage everyone to think this way. But effectively, rather than spending every week at Woolies, if you put a prepayment or a monthly commitment towards a farmer to produce food for you, he or she will do a few things. A, their business will change because they know what they need to produce, and they're not going to be, hoping they're going to get it right with the weather or whatever. They'll plan and produce. The wastage is far less, and it's a much better way for a business to work. You'll get your food, and you'll know it's coming. You won't have to wait, you won't have to hope. You'll get stuff that's seasonal and fresh and nose to tail and all the things you're supposed to be eating. But there's something indefinable that goes with that, which I love, and it's this. Is that a farmer who knows who he's growing food for, or she who knows, puts a lot of love into it. They put energy into it, which is, you can't calculate it, but you can feel it. You know when food's been looked after and cared for. And that's not just not putting chemicals in, but it's looking after the soil and feeling the excitement of growing stuff that I know people will enjoy. Look, farmland is actually a good investment right now, and I'm not telling you this for investment advice, but I'm just reading everything I hear, is that as interest rates go up and, stock markets collapse and everything else, the rush towards hard assets like gold and land becomes more pronounced. And food doesn't go out of fashion. You're always growing and producing something people need. The last 3 years skyrocketed. The price of farms has gone through the roof, and outperforming capital cities in terms of real estate capital growth. And you can't eat gold. And look, people like this guy are buying up great tracts of farmland in this country right now. So if you actually saw on a map, and I haven't got one, but I'd love to see it, who's buying what tract of land around the country and how much is corporate owned versus owned by, ma and pa farmer. It's a very, very disturbing picture. All right, and I'm not saying he's nefarious, maybe, I don't know, but he knows it's a good investment. But wouldn't it be better for our investment? Wouldn't it be better if it's our self-managed super or our money in that where we had control? Because I can promise you that corporates don't give a hoot about regenerative farming, because there's no money in it for them, right? It involves long-term thinking. Now, they get in there, and I know them. I know some that will go in there and they'll just rip it apart for 5 years, take what they can, then sell it on. And that's not all of them, but some of them. So they don't have the same, their goal is profit. Our goal with regenerative farming is long-term sustainability. Very, very different. Self-managed super, I just said, I didn't know anything about this, but your super is actually probably invested in some fairly uncomfortable companies if you really look into it. It's quite regularly supporting the things we don't support in our own personal life. So we've found a lady, Catherine Smith, who is advising everyone in our groups now to say, even if you've got fairly minimal amount of superannuation, it can be converted into self-managed super and put into farms. So a lot of people are using that, not realising that, I've got people who've got super and they say, look, I want to put it into the farm because I don't think I'll ever see it otherwise, the way things are going. This is the Kyogle farm. So it's 560 something acres, beautiful clean water off the mountain. This is the Border Ranges National Park behind it. And it's got it's beautiful energy, but it's also got fabulous production value and lovely places to camp and good places to visit. So if we go again, there's a few more pictures of it here. There's 120 roughly co-owners on this. So I'm the chief cat herder, so it's been a matter of dragging people around this idea. Farmer runs the show for us. We as co-owners get to go out and stay there every now and then, go camp, take the kids out, we've got the creek. So we've got this beautiful mixture of, beautiful country to explore as well as food production. Some of the stuff we'll produce out there, again, we're settling on this hopefully next week is the plan, and then the farmer's ready to move out 1st of December. So by about January, February, we'll start seeing food starting to be produced on there. This is our farmer, Erhard. He's got 30 years experience. He's an investor also. So we've got this formula there where, the farmer's got to be as invested as everyone else. And we support him or her as much as we can. We've raised, that farm's worth, we've bought it for, it was advertised at $4 million. We've got a discount on that. We've bought it at better value than that. But we've also bought all the equipment that's out there, and we've raised working capital. So we've raised about $6 million to buy it. And that sounds like a lot of money. It is. It came about literally from just this idea. I just said, what if we all bought a farm, and I'll just put it out to the PWQ community, the Parents with Questions community, and said to people, hey, if we could do this, who's interested? And we had 100 people put their hand up. And I went, all right, so roughly in that number. And I think it was 75 on one webinar and about 35, 40 on the next webinar. And I thought, wow, there's something here. And then we went, okay, now we've got to figure out how to do it, because you've got to have all the legal structures and things in place. But knowing what was there and available and knowing what people needed just showed $6 million raised in 2 webinars. 2 hours of work brought $6 million towards buying this. I'm actually getting paid out of this now. So the Parents with Questions was being a labour of love. This is now, I'm getting paid as the coordinator of these things. So I'm now making a living, which my wife's happy about. This is the Sunshine Coast Farm. So this is not dissimilar sort of setup. This is up near Mullumbimby. Beautiful water on the place. Nice hill in the middle with all the infrastructure on there. It's well set up for regenerative grazing. All these paddocks are divided into about 20 paddocks. So the cows, rather than just doing what you see around here where they all just graze anywhere they want all day, are herded like a herd of buffalo on the plains. If you think about before white man arrived in North America, the buffalo would just herd in a big herd, just move around the plains, and every now and then a predator would turn up and chase them to the next spot, and they'd eat grass and they'd poo and wee all over it, and then another predator would turn up and they'd run over here, but they'd always stay together. So they'd trample everything down and they'd turn it over and they'd defecate on it and they'd fertilise it, and then they'd move, and that patch of grass or that pasture would then regenerate. It would have all the nutrient back in it, and the grass would come back up. So that's the natural sequence of how grazing should work. What we do here is that the animals just eat everything down non-stop all the time, and it never really grows up and gets the nutrients. So as long as you've got short grass, you've also got short roots in the grass. So when the rain hits, if it's got long roots, it'll sink in and stay in the soil in the dry times. If the rain hits when it's short grass, it just runs off. So this is how grazing, again, I'm learning these things as we go, is supposed to work. By doing this, we're sequestering carbon. This is not just carbon neutral, this is actually carbon positive, so if that's the right word, but we're putting carbon back in the soil. And I've actually questioned the whole climate thing these days, but because of the narrative, I just don't trust any of it. But what I do know is that carbon in the soil is a good thing, because it means there's higher nutrients in the soil, there's more life in the soil, it holds more water in the soil. And again, that's 300 acres or just shy of it. These are all the kids. One of the great things about the farm, my litmus test, we've been to a few now. See how the kids react when they get there. And they just become kids again. All the devices get left in the car. They chuck rocks in the creek, and the mums go, "Don't get wet." And of course, they straight in and get wet, and it's just awesome. And I'm like, that's what it's about, having kids doing that kind of thing, get their hands dirty. This one's got these beautiful big timber sheds. They obviously need a repair, and they're old, but they're all hardwood timber up at Connery. So we're going to turn that into a beautiful sort of venue, a rustic function centre, because we need a gathering space. We're going to get everyone together and gather and, have workshops and so on. And we've got plans to do sort of ecotourism, this sort of thing, hiking, horse riding, all the sort of possibilities there. This is the sort of thing we're planning on building, just some basic stuff for our members to go and camp and stay out there. Again, we've got budget. We've raised the money to have the budget for these things. We're looking at putting this out at Kyogle. This is about a $250,000 shed, which is just beautiful for functions and things inside, a bit more upmarket. You can imagine having long lunches and things out there. Again, bearing in mind the farm is about bringing people together as much as feeding them. We've got a farmer mentoring and development program locked in, so we'll be training interns of new farmers as they come through. So that could be someone who's retired from a corporate career, wants to get into do something useful in farming, or there could be some young kid who wants to get out of school and do this. We need more farmers. We need more people who know how to grow food. Currently in Australia, the average farmer's age is something over 60, I think. So, we've got a problem there, unless we want everything to be done by machines and robots, which I don't personally. So this is capping off what I said. There's some really good reasons to own a farm. not least of which is it's real estate. You know, it's a hard asset. And there's even a cash return on it, so we should see within a couple of years, 2 to 5% cash return on everyone's investment, not including the capital growth. So it's a reasonable, and again, I'm not here to sell you investment, I'm just giving you I'm very happy for someone else going to replicate this, by the way. But this is why people are seeing it. We've just looked at every angle of it and said, well, let's just take let's make it as simple as possible and tick every box for people. We've got an AFSL holder. We're working under, I don't know what the terminology is, we're working under them anyway. So this means we've got all the red tape ticked and your accountant will like it. It's all those really, really boring stuff, but it's necessary. So it's all very, very mainstream above board in terms of the structures. If you're interested in one of those, that's the website. You can check that out and sort of be kept up to date. Again, no pressure whatsoever. We've actually got, both farms are fully subscribed. We have plans for Sydney. We've got about 100, 200 people in Sydney who want to farm. Perth, Margaret River, South Australia, and Victoria. And Bundaberg are asking, Toowoomba maybe as well. So it's kind of, it's getting its own momentum. And I believe unfortunately, look, I hope we'll never be necessary as a food source, genuinely. Like I've always hoped parents' questions would always be completely unnecessary because no one it would just, they'd think twice and think, oh, we shouldn't give this stuff to our kids, how ridiculous. They'd reverse the decision and we'd be defunct. That would have been my preference from the beginning. But, as I said, it can be a creation to hedge against what's coming, but also created out of joy and out of love. Because I think if we do it out of a position of defence, it becomes a real chore and imbued with a really unhealthy energy. But if it's done from a point of view of, you know what, yeah, that might happen, but also I want to feed our kids. We want to have a great life. We want to connect with good people. Let's create what we want. This is some of the training I won't go into this because I'm over time, but we've got some bigger plans here too to go into creating the leaders that we need now. So I've always been big on leadership, and I feel that the leaders we've been looking for, I've certainly been disappointed in who's been up there in the last little while. I'm like, man, is this it? Bloody Albanese and Morrison and these people? I'm like, wow. They're hardly the glowing specimens of humanity or masculinity. So for me, I thought I want to see leaders up there that I can feel inspired by. And I believe they'll come from the next generation. They're the kids right now. And we need them now, but we need to nurture them now. So we've got some more things coming. So watch this space around that. This is our vision, 2030. And the last slide, thanks, narrator, is this thought. We were talking something the other day about homeschool or where to get your food from. There's a couple of conversations came up, and a couple of people said at different times, oh, but that's not very convenient for me. And I'm like, yeah, no shit. Of course it's not convenient. But courage and convenience don't come wrapped up in the same package, I don't believe. Convenience has been weaponised against us. Take away your convenience and you'll do as you're told. I said, no, how about I just don't need it anymore? And that's where courage steps in. You say, you know what? If I just stop needing that, I'll do the unreasonable things. I'll make unreasonable demands of myself, and I'll have an unreasonable vision for my family, because reasonable has actually got me to where I didn't want to be. It had me be a victim. So that's yeah. Giving up convenience means we can stop being compliant, and we stop needing it. If we don't need it, we transcend it. There's the final thought. This is the final thought. Thank you.